Hello and welcome back to Rage Gaming and more Season 3 Necromancer. Today I have a big update for you though, the much hoped for Bone Spirit build. Only as you can see, this isn't quite just Bone Spirit as the core concept, it is just Bone Spear with Bone Spirit. Except there's a lot more going on here than first meets the eye. For example, I'm running Bone Prison, which is rewarding an extreme amount of essence, both when you place it and also when it expires. I'm generating this pile of essence, despite not actually running a basic attack. There's literally no room in the build for, say, standard skills that you'd pick, such as Decrepify for the DR. This is like the dawn of a new build for Necromancer, so it's an exciting time. Bone Spirit here consumes all of your essence when you use it, creating a deadly spirit bomb you can kind of aim. It has a reasonable cooldown after use and obviously leaves you drained. When I last tried to make this work, it was pre-season and it was simply too demanding with too small of an impact big picture, though the damage on each use was incredible. We have this new aspect, Shattered Spirit. It means the Bone Spirit is sending out these shards in all directions like a splinter shot after impact, resolving Bone Spirit's awkward small radius on the explosion. It's dealing huge damage, and what's vital is that it's generating a ton of essence per enemy hit, so it's actually brilliant in AoE clear. The raw damage wise, they increased the damage per essence spent for the cast by 1%, so it's now sitting at 4% per essence. Then we have one of its enhancements, Dreadful Bone Spirit. It's now restoring 30% of your maximum essence instead of just straight 30 essence, which is terrible. And since we're raising our essence amount a lot in this build, that means there's way more essence actually being restored by this. On the other hand, we have Bone Prison. First, we had a change where they made it so anyone can walk through Bone Prison freely now, including you, allies, or minions. The ability was quite awkward for that reason. Now it's a lot better. Now by default, when you enhance it, it just means enemies inside are vulnerable. There's not like a time limit on it. So those inside are vulnerable. But even more importantly, we have the changed Ghastly Bone Prison, providing 25 essence by default on use with an extra 5 essence per enemy trap. The reality of this is even better. So we've emptied our essence and now let's use a Bone Prison. We generated some essence when it spawned, and then as it goes away shortly after, it gives us the same amount of essence back again. Twice the amount of essence it seems to actually want to provide us on paper. And I can activate that whenever I want. So I can put the Bone Prison down and then get rid of it, and it gives me the essence instantly. So I've gained nearly half my essence there just by pressing Bone Prison on one target. And of course, it's going to give me extra essence the more targets there are. And we can enhance how much essence this is actually giving us by using certain affixes on our gear. This is huge for our essence generation generally, but unfortunately it's not all good news. There has been a undocumented change to splintering this aspect here. Bone Spirit's primary attack makes enemies hit beyond the first enemy vulnerable. Previously, the actual spear that I threw there would have caused vulnerability with that aspect. I believe it was in Season 2 when they fixed that, but they didn't fully fix it, because obviously when I throw a bone spear, it's going to break and reflect these splinters back. Those splinters were still causing vulnerability, so essentially it was still guaranteed to generate vulnerability on its own. Obviously, that is not the case anymore. There is no vulnerability being triggered on this dummy as I shoot it. There has to be another target in front of it before that'll happen, which means in the skill tree, this is a very important choice. Paranormal is no longer the go-to because you might want to be taking Supernatural to guarantee that Bone Spear is actually generating vulnerable when you use it. So yeah, this all leads to a lot of choices and a lot of changes, lots to test because things are different that they've not told us. But for now, I've got this ultra strong version of the build that I'm happy with. Let me just explain now though what I'm running and why, and you can get started. That was a big intro, so I'm going to be really quick where I can be. First, with the skill tree, it doesn't matter what you take as a basic, we're not going to use it, so you have to spend 2 points to get to the next point, where of course we have Bone Spear maxed out, enhanced, and then there's that choice. Are you going to go paranormal to make Bone Spear more effective and dangerous? Or are you going to go supernatural and worry more about making your Bone Spirit more consistent with its damage every time you use it? I would suggest you take supernatural at least for now, because it's going to affect your main aspect, splintering, and you're going to need that generation of vulnerability as a consistent source. So unfortunately, I just think supernatural is the better choice. Obviously, we're going Unliving Energy maxed out for the max essence we desperately want, and making our core skills stronger with and perfectly balanced for Bone Spear. I only have 2 points in Hued Flesh because that's all I can afford, as you'll see, and we're taking Blood Mist just as a filler button. There are those moments when you do need true invulnerability, and it does mean if we enhance it and go for Ghastly, we have a guarantee way to generate corpses, such as the start of a single target fight where you need them and don't want to rely on the RNG of Hued Flesh. So it's nice to have. Obviously, we're taking Bone Prison, which is a major generator of essence essence for this build. Enhanced, it makes enemies vulnerable that are inside, and it's going to give us 25 essence on use and 25 more essence when it finishes, plus an additional 5 per enemy within, plus however much you've got in your affixes, increasing how much this generates. So it's causing a lot of essence. On the next tree, we just have 3 points in Death's Embrace, further damage reduction to close enemies, and since we're going to be closer to them when we use Bone Spirit, we're going to be dealing more anyway. On the next tree, we have 1 point in Corpse Tendrils, and we take it to play to have another source of guaranteed vulnerable. We max out Bone Spirit 5 out of 5, of course, enhancing it to Dreadful with the new changes to help with the essence generation. For the Bone passives, we're taking everything. Bone skills increase crit strike chance for each 30 essence you have, means you're more likely to actually crit with your Bone Spirit. Vital, because if Bone Spirit critically hits, its cooldown is majorly reduced. Compound Fracture is going to improve our bone skill damage, as well as Evulsion specifically to vulnerable enemies, so it's even more important. Rapid Ossification is also really important for this build, because per every 100 essence you spend, it reduces the cooldown of bone skills, such as Bone Spirit, such as Bone Storm. So it's absolutely vital you have that now in this build. Also, it's a full sacrifice build, so standalone and Memento Mori. Obviously, we're taking Bone Storm, and of course, our key passive of Ossified Essence. For the Book of the Dead, it should be pretty straightforward. We sacrifice Skirmishers for this crit strike chance, Skeletal Mages we go Shadow for the max essence increase, and Golem is Iron for the crit strike damage increase. Next up, we have my Paragon, which is obviously not technically finished because I'm level 97, nearly 98, but I'll tell you what I was going to do anyway. Here is my starting board, spending my points like so, getting extra damage and resistance. The first glyph is Corporeal. This means you deal 10% times increased physical damage, which, by the way, both Bone Spear and Bone Spirit is, so it's a major damage increase. It also provides a boost to the magic nodes within range, so it's increasing the effect of, say, these armor nodes, the damage nodes, even the stat nodes. It's very nice. On the second board, we're of course going Bone Graft, which should be no surprise. Just make sure that you're picking up Calcified, the nodes around that, Reinvigorate, grabbing Entomb for the crit strike damage with Bone Skills magic nodes, and that's basically why we do that. And then for the glyph itself, on the second board we have Essence. This provides loads of extra crit strike damage. I'm also picking up a little bit of Erudite and the nodes around that for extra resistance to all elements. We'll talk about in the gear section. But this is how I achieve this glyph and get it powered up to 49 dexterity in the circle around it. On the third board, we have Scent of Death. Work my way down and through Ruin and pick up the nodes around that to increase our critical strike damage and damage to healthy enemies, so we burst them to begin with. Picking up Scent of Death on the way, and here's my third glyph, which is Sacrificial. This is great because you just need to activate it. You don't need to go beyond the intelligence required to activate it. Since there's 2 rare nodes here that are going to give us 10 each, and a bunch on the way in, it's actually very easy to activate this even if you haven't got the radius extended. The glyph itself provides 10% times increased damage while you have no active minions, which we obviously don't have any, so that's awesome. But it also provides a bonus to all magic nodes within range, so it's going to enhance the damage to injured enemy nodes as well as the armor nodes. Though I've been pretty min-maxed on this, I'm probably going to come fill these out once I have some bonus points after I finish what I'm doing. On the way out of this board though, I do come over to Corrective. This provides us with lots of extra critical strike damage thanks to these nodes and the node itself. Coming up to our fourth board, we have Flesh Eater, which has a nice glyph socket and some important rare nodes like Targeted and Stifle. But obviously I'm not taking Flesh Eater because I'm not consuming corpses in this build. This is something I'm thinking about changing in the future. I'm going to be doing lots of testing. So I come up through Stifle and pick up the nodes around that for the extra critical strike damage that provides. Come around to the actual glyph, which is Imbiber. This provides more damage while you're healthy, and it also enhances the potency of your potion healing, helping you stay healthy. But it does require you to be healthy as much as possible, and if that's an issue for you, I would think about something else. In that case, you probably need DR, so maybe Territorial. These are the nodes around it that I activate to get it to 39 willpower, to max out how potent it actually is in the immediate moment. Also, you can see that I'm starting to work my way to the right to this node, Color, which we'll mention at the end is one of the last things I'm doing. At that point though, we spend the few points it takes to come to the left to come to our next board, which has the Exploit glyph on it, and the board barely matters at all. It's Bloodbath because it's a nice finisher, but it's not all that important. We're just using it for a glyph socket. That glyph is Exploit, increasing our vulnerable damage, and dealing damage to vulnerable enemies increases your damage at a stacking Healing Ray. So it's obviously a very good glyph for this build, and I've got 49 decks with the extended radius and all the decks around this glyph, and that's how I've done it. At this point, I've got some leftover points coming. I've got 2 levels and 1 extra node, which means I've got 9 points to spend still. I'm going to spend 6 more points here to come to the right and pick up color, as well as the magic nodes for attack speed next to it, just so I can send out Bone Spears a little bit faster. Then for my final points, I'm going to come to the glyphs like, say, Sacrificial here, that enhance the magic nodes around it to pick up some extra dexterity, extra willpower, maybe some extra armor, though I don't really need it. That's where my final points are going to go. Next up, it's time for us to talk about the construct for the Governing Stones. I believe this is just not up for debate. You want to be running Flash of Adrenaline. Basically, it means the construct is regularly juicing you up, increasing your damage dealt by what I believe will be 20% at its max rank for a hefty 12 seconds with the one I've got equipped here. This is absolutely ridiculous. It's a major DPS increase you definitely want to be running. Only reason not to run it is because you're taking too much damage to survive, at which point I guess you could run something like Protect, but I don't think it's worth it. For the supports, I'm running Tactical to decrease the cooldown so that this is activating and being applied to me more often. I'm running Duration so that it lasts an extra 4 seconds at this max rank level. And I'm running Safeguard just as some nice extra damage reduction regularly when I get this applied to me. For the other Governing Stone, the offensive one I'm running, it's of course Tempest, and this is a no-brainer. It causes an electric charge that deals damage to an enemy and then deals damage over time. If that enemy is killed, the Tempest will spread, gaining time for the debuff and dealing bonus damage. This continues to spread and stack up more and more and gets to quite relevant damage. But it's the constant application and the ticks of damage that matter, not how much damage it's actually doing. Because for example with resource support, I'm getting my resources back as that happens, as it spreads the damage and continuously ticks out. So it's a major essence gen, Tempest and resource support specifically. We can make this better by running arcing support, meaning the Tempest spreads to more targets and starts stacking up faster and spreading through packs of mobs instantly, and this gets ridiculous because at level 10 arcing support it spreads to 10 enemies at once. Also, I'm running efficiency support to help with crit strike chance against those affected by it, so that's great for this build obviously, but I will be replacing 2 of these stones when I eventually get them, the unique stones of Evernight and Genesis. Genesis is going to support Flash of Adrenaline, improving its effectiveness. I'm probably going to get rid of Safeguard support for that, and then Evernight is going to give me +4 to all skills, which is ridiculous, and that's going to go on Tempest and probably on efficiency support once I have enough crit strike chance in the build, which I kind of do already. Okay, time to talk about gear. Starting with the aspects, we're just going to run through them. For the helmet, I want to enhance the damage of Bone Spear, so I'm running Deathless Visage. There's nothing in the game that really challenges me at this point, because we don't have like Abattoir or the gauntlets they're going to add soon. So extra damage is what it's all about, and Deathless Visage is going to provide that. On the chest piece, I have Shielding Storm. It's a very nice defensive. I am not running Disobedience in this build, because as you can see, I'm running Juggernauts, the new aspect that provides up to 6,000 armor, but your evade has 100% cooldown. That's horrible. Horrible especially for a Necromancer that's so slow, which is why you must be running boots that have the plus maximum evade charges, because it doesn't matter that my evade's on a long cooldown when I have 4 charges of it, so I always have an evade ready to evade an attack that might really hurt me. With Juggernauts giving me straight 6k armor, I'm up to 13,760 armor just standing here, which is over the amount that I need. Because we don't have Abattoir, we don't need more than 12.5k armor. The number will go up, but it won't even do anything at a certain point. So just having what I've got on my armor with Juggernauts is more than enough. On the gloves, of course, we've got Serration. This is increasing the damage we're dealing with our bone skills based on how much essence we've got at the time. And on the boots, we've got Wind Striker, because we don't have a consistent source of Unstoppable outside of Blood Mist, which CCs us and makes us do no damage, so I don't like using it. So since we're critting all the time, it just means we get a little bit of boost of movement speed regularly, which we desperately need. On the weapon, it's still splintering, even though it's nowhere near as good as it used to be. It's still providing bonus damage to enemies that are vulnerable, and with us testing Supernatural Bone Spear again, enemies basically being vulnerable all the time is very important to the build. Therefore, we're getting this big DPS increase pretty much the whole way. As I showed though, on my amulet, it's Grasping Vein still, giving us crit strike chance, which we desperately need in this build, as well as crit strike damage, which is awesome to those affected by the corpse tendrils. We're running the new aspect Shattered Spirit to make our Bone Spirit bomb in AoE bone splinters and also generate loads of essence. And of course, we're still running Exposed Flesh, meaning when we hit a vulnerable enemy, we have a chance to generate essence. I have a really low roll on this, which sucks, but I'll get a better roll eventually, I'm sure. On the offhand, on the focused, I have have Swelling Curse. This means Bone Spirit's critical strike chance is increased by up to 25%, which is very important, again, because it helps reset the cooldown. But this has a second effect. Your maximum essence is increased by 2 for each enemy hit for 15 seconds. So as you AoE enemies, you actually raise your essence. It's a really cool aspect. To fit all that in the build though, I can't really afford to run a two-hander. I have to use a one-hander and off-hander, and that's why I've done that. Alright, so for affixes, it's pretty important. You need crit strike chance because you need to be critting always. Obviously your rings and your gloves are obvious examples. This is then closely followed by wanting to increase your maximum essence as much as you can, as well as finding any essence generation affixes you can get. You can get them on your rings, and you can also get a % chance to generate essence on your gloves. Naturally, as usual though, you want your other main things like ranks of Bone Spear on your gloves and the Evulsion passive on your amulet, but you're also going to want levels of Bone Spirit on your boots, which is found, on your boots instead of your gloves, so very important to get ranks of that. You can even get more ranks of it on your amulet by getting levels of Macabre skills, which I've been unable to get, which will actually level up not just Bone Spirit, but also Blood Mist, which can be handy on the cooldown for that, and Bone Prison, by the way. Under those priorities, you're looking for, say, attack speed so you can do more Bone Spears faster, vulnerable damage, crit strike damage with normal or bone skills, and of course intelligence. Defensively, you want the usual picks: armor, damage reduction, max life, and a suitable 4th damage reduction 4th pick. That could be like DR from close or far or while injured. We want that on your chest and your legs as a bare minimum on all 4 affixes if you can get them. In terms of gems, it's the usual. We've got extra health in our armor. We've got the critical strike damage to vulnerable enemies in the weapons. And then in the jewelry, it's whatever you need to get your resistances capped to 70%. For me, this ended up being resistance to all elements. I'm just lacking on cold resistance based on the affixes I've got in my armor, but you should gem for whatever you need and reach for 70% in everything. For the quick gameplay guide, since I think it's important to have one for this build, it's basically just Bone Spear spam all the way. And it's even simpler because you don't have to worry about, say, Decrepify or Iron Maiden to maintain on targets. You just by default throw Bone Spears. Then Bone Prison whenever you need a burst of essence, while smashing targets with a Bone Spirit regularly. Ideally, you'll be hitting multiple targets, a big pack of enemies with your Bone Spirit, which will increase the essence you have, the essence generation you get from it, and you can force that issue by, say, using a Corpse Tendrils to pull them together and also give you way more damage on those targets. So great for grouping up enemies for that purpose, but also destroying elites in one hit, even in a tier 100. For a single target, you set up the fight with a Blood Mist to generate the corpses to begin with. Now you've got a corpse, you can Corpse Tendril it for the big buff from that. We guarantee the target is vulnerable with your Bone Spear, and then smash them with a Bone Spirit, which should be critting to instantly restore Bone Spirit and all your essence, so you can do a second Bone Spirit. Then we just spam Bone Spear, Corpse Tendril on cooldown, recover your essence how you can, and dump more Bone Spirits when you're near full essence every time. But that's the build. Like I said throughout this video, there's still lots of things to test and try, so I expect to be back soon with a follow-up after that testing. But for now, this build is doing very well, it's dominating for me, and I hope it does well for you. Until next time then, I've been Hollow, you've been you, thanks for watching.
Josh, Cotton, and Hollow with the videos, dropping the humor like a hammer on your tippy toes, bringing entertainment on a daily arrangement to take our insanity and turn it into entertainment. Yes, I said entertainment twice, to reiterate that it is nice to look into your faces on a mostly daily basis when you let us in your homes to make the whole world a stage. Goodbye.